Hello and welcome to Bird is the Word, Winged Heroes in Indie Games. I am Valentine. I'm the senior staff writer with GamesIndustry.biz, and I have with me four fantastic people who are making games that feature birds. I'm gonna have you go around and introduce yourselves. Can we start with Megan?
Hello, my name is Megan Fox. I run Glass Bottom Games. I'm most currently working on Skatebird. You might know me from previous games like Spartan Fist or Hot Tin Roof. Ages ago I made a game, well, I helped make a game called Lego Universe, etc. Hello.
Hey everyone, my name is Nicholas McDonnell. I'm the managing director at Samurai Punk. We are probably best known for Screen Sheet or The American Dream. Feather is one of our smaller projects that we worked on for a long time and is still being worked on. It's a really relaxing game about being a bird and flying around with your friends on a huge island.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Kang Sun. I'm one of the developers from Joysteak Studios, who is behind the ultra cute bird game called Songbird Symphony. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Joel Davis. I'm an artist and animator with Stonewheat and Sons, and we're making Kiwi, which is a cooperative game about two kiwi birds that work at the post office. And Kiwi is our first game.
So as you have probably noticed, all of these people have games with birds prominently featured as main characters or main themes. What was it about birds that, was it like a passion for birds? How did you end up making a game about birds? Anybody?
Go for it.
I can answer. My answer is pretty simple, actually. So we started Feather as a clone of Ace of Seafood, which is a game about shooting fish as fish. So, but it was going to be, you're a bird shooting other birds, which is actually very similar to a game called Falconeer. But the prototype kind of fell apart really fast. And it just ended up being this really relaxing game about flying around a big island because that's all we got done in time because it was a game jam. And we just really honed in on what being a bird in that sort of space enables you to do as a player. Especially once we got the multiplayer aspects of the game in, it really provided a really interesting sort of backdrop for a social experience for players. And they're just so graceful. I mean, the first bird we used was a kestrel, and it's just like it suited the sort of chill atmosphere of the game quite a lot for us.
Were you already into games? Were you already into birds when you started working on Feather? Was there like a background in birds?
I don't think I had any real specific background in birds, besides just enjoying watching them when I go for hikes or seeing them in my look. There's a lot of birds in Australia that are really cool, and you can go to any park and see Roselias around and stuff. So, but no, nothing super particular.
What about the rest of the panel? How did Jeanette make a game about birds?
In my case, it was actually kind of, well, not accidental. I like birds. I spend a lot of time just watching birds. The way I've got my where I drink tea in the morning set up, I'm just watching where the birds get fed, and I've lost entire hours there. But yeah, a friend of mine was working on a prototype for a skateboarding physics thing, and he had really cool board physics. But the second he put a person on them and the board flipped out, the person looked like they were some weird, horrifying puppet, and they couldn't keep up with the board. And then he said, does anyone want to like take this concept over and take this code base and do something with it? And it hit me that if you put a bird on the board, that it breaking and looking horrifying would actually be really cute because birds can't skateboard. And I had just seen a GIF of a bird, literally, like you can teach a bird to skateboard. I don't know if you know this. Google, it's fun on the internet. And I just seen a GIF of that. It's like, oh my God, I could do this. And that's why. It was like 3 years ago.
Kiwi was also started as a game jam game. We were participating in the Orlando branch of the Global Game Jam. We had 48 hours, and the theme of the game had to be transmission. And we drew a random modifier that our game had to feature a bird protagonist. So we spent about 15 minutes talking about how that would translate into a game. We liked the idea of postal birds that couldn't fly, so they worked a desk job. And someone sketched a picture of a kiwi wearing a headset, and that was it. We kind of just built the setting and the game out from there.
Yeah, so for Songbird Symphony, so actually the idea started from my partner, whose name is Hanif. So we were still in school at that time. We were and he took a course in animal behaviors, and he learned that birds actually learn from one another through singing. And then we were thinking that probably that could make like a good game mechanic, like for a rhythm game. And for myself, I like games as a storytelling medium. So I was like thinking if there is a way to mix both like rhythm games and storytelling elements together in a game. And I was thinking that it could be like presented in the form of a musical, like featuring birds. So yep, that's how we came about doing Songbird Symphony.
So I asked Nicholas, but it sounds like none of you really had a strong, none of you were like keeping birds or were like, I'm just blanking on the word birdologist or whatever before this.
No, at least for me, I'd liked birds before, and they were kind of a cute thing, and I saw them and I started feeding them, and I've gradually gotten more involved. But a lot of that process happened after Skatebird. Like starting on Skatebird, oh, hey, this works, and I like birds, and birds are cute, et cetera. And then looked closer at the birds, like, oh, birds actually don't really move very smoothly. They kind of twitch. Oh, I could, if I exploit that, I don't have to do tween frames. I could just pop between animation frames and say, oh, the bird did it. It's like, so it kind of grew from there.
Did anyone else develop a greater appreciation of birds or knowledge of birds as a result of making their games?
For us, I'll say I'm definitely the zoology geek on the team, which is helpful as an animator because I don't mind looking at tons and tons of video reference of animals and reading anatomy books and stuff. So for me, it was really exciting to have the main character in our first game be an animal, but specifically a bird, because I do really like birds. I'm interested in them for a lot of reasons. I just think they're really cool. They occupy a really interesting place in the evolutionary tree, and they're such a varied group of animals.
Yeah, so I don't really know a lot of scientific facts about birds. The only things I know about birds was through Kiki Flipnote. I watched a lot of Kiki Flipnote GIFs, but then it is during like the making of Songbird Symphony that I started to learn more about birds, which is necessary for the making of the game. And I also discovered a lot of new birds, new exotic birds that you can't see in Singapore, which is just a very small island on the globe. I didn't know about the existence of the cassowary, but now I know, and it's featured. It's one of the birds featured in the game. It's probably something you guys hear a lot, but I haven't heard about that bird before. And also birds like the blue-footed boobies, the birds of paradise. So all these are amazing to me. And I only find out about them when I was already like deep in the development of the game. Yeah.
Did anybody learn any interesting bird facts while researching their games that they want to share?
I learned a pretty cool fact about cassowaries, actually, because our game features cassowaries as well. That they produce this low frequency, almost like infrasound that's just on the verge of human hearing. You would assume they make like a screech or a squawk or something. They produce this really low rumble where they get low. I don't know if you've ever seen a cassowary. I have one with me here today. I don't know how well this is showing up.
They occasionally show up in Australian zoos, and they're really scary.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I think I had that exact same figurine as a child, and I don't really understand how.
This one's new for me. Yeah, that was a cool fact about cassowaries that I learned. It's like the deepest bird noise in the bird kingdom.
I've kind of got the same thing. I don't know if it's not the deepest, clearly, but I was trying to find out. So I've got kookaburras in my game, which are a ground parrot. No, sorry, kakapo. Kakapo or kookaburra. One of them is the bird that laughs, and one of them is the green ground parrot, and my brain is stalling on them. So regardless, the fluffy green ground parrot that's really friendly because they have no natural predators where they live. I was trying to find out the call that they make, and it turns out they only really make 2 calls, one of which is way too horrifying to put in a video game. And the other one is they actually dig out these not really burrows, like hollows in the ground, which are literally speakers, and they hunker down in them and they thump. And their mating rituals are like a goth club, sort of. Like a bunch of them get around and hunker down in holes and thump. And the ones that make the deepest, loudest bass get the ladies. If they had like spinner hubcaps and the cars that hop, they would be all the way there. It's like, it's adorable. And because of that, I've thought about trying to like canonically turn them in the game into like DJs or something. But yeah, it's a very strange bird fact. Look it up, I'm serious.
Bird dating game on the horizon. Any other cool bird facts? So we had some people who submitted some questions ahead of this panel, and one of them was someone who's asking that this wasn't a super specific question, but they said they had a lot of questions on flap versus fly versus glide physics and how that all gets implemented at once. Is that something any of you can speak to?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that. Basically, our birds don't have any gravity except when they're diving. So we had to Feather's approach to flight simulation, I guess, because ours is, if anything, a simulation of flight. We basically were like, what's all the things that you imagine are cool about flying as a bird, and what are all the things that you don't want to think about? And one of those is like climbing, and it going up is very hard from like a physicsy perspective. So we're just like, let's make it feel great to swoop by giving you gravity when you're falling, but not when you're going up. So that climbing, getting height as a bird is easy, and then diving is really fast. And then we also were a like pro gliding style of gameplay, I guess, to answer the question more specifically. So we have a flap, but it's basically a proxy for sprint, which would be like an FPS. So you're either moving at like base speed or sprint speed, and that gets represented as like short flaps and long flaps for the bird, as if they were like, because the birds are kind of always at cruising speed, so they're just kind of flapping idly to maintain that speed.
Yeah, I think flying in feather feels really good. So I tried that game before. I met Nicholas at Busan last year, and the moment I sat down, and the game felt so good that I didn't know how quick time just went by. Yeah, so I think their approach to like flying in video games is really good. For ours, we did think about adding like flying, like allowing the players to like just move around the level anyhow they want. But then because of game design restrictions, we have to take them out, because like having flying in the game quickly makes a big level feels much smaller, because the players can move around, go to places much more easily. So, and that's not very, it's not very easy to design a level for a flying mechanic. Yeah.
I guess Joel and Megan, your games do not really feature flying at all either.
Well,
yours sort of does.
Well, what Kingston said with, by the way, if I get your name wrong, I apologize. Please correct me.
Yeah, that's right. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well,
or you can just call me KS. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, regardless, KS, you mentioned the not having flying because it makes the level feel small, and that's kind of the same direction we ended up, why our birds don't fly as such. Like, we thought about even adding gliding, but even gliding, if you can get height, suddenly you can go pretty much anywhere in the level, and it kind of trivializes the skateboarding mechanic. And Zalave, writer / designer, etc., also on the team, made the point that, look, even that's going to push it too far. So the only flying that we do is essentially flapping, which people are convinced is why the birds seem to get so much air. Actually, we just have low gravity with the max speed because it feels good. But by making the bird flap, we can cover for a lot of things that are physically inaccurate, but because the bird is flapping, people think it works. like the transfer system is total garbage for doing spine transfers over the back of a ramp. But once you make the bird flap and make the cute little flappy noises, it all feels fine. Or the getting huge air, which is a very Tony Hawk thing. Realistically, that doesn't happen, but because the little bird is doing flappy flappy, it works somehow. It's a really strange effect. And hopefully me admitting this won't like ruin it for everyone. But yeah, it's a great cheat.
Yeah, our characters, Jeff and Deborah, the Kiwis, do not fly on their own. The closest they come to flying is if they fall off of the workstation they're on, they'll parachute back in via a little airmail parachute. Although there are parts later in the game where they get access to some machinery and contraptions that will let them get airborne to get their work done.
Jeff and Deborah are really good names for little birds delivering mail.
They really are.
Thanks.
So still talking about movement, and Megan kind of mentioned a little bit of the twitchiness earlier. How do you take the sort of sporadic, random twitchy moves birds like to do and make them look natural, right? Like how do you handle their sort of tendency towards twitch movements, since 7 Games tends to move a little bit slower?
I mean, sorry, we basically just don't do it at all. That was the thing I like, you know, a lot of us talked about how we sort of learnt more as we went through the process. By the time I got to the point, Feather, you couldn't land anywhere in the game until like weeks before we shipped the game. It was a very late edition. And at that point, the bird was gliding, the camera was quite zoomed out, and you could never really see any of the details on its animation besides like very broad strokes animations. So things like small head twitches and eye movements weren't even remotely visible. Some of those animations I started to bring in when we did landing, but I could point later to the quality of the rig in Feather, but it was not designed to let the bird stand and sit on something. So based on the restrictions, I wasn't able to get a lot of it, but I was able to get a little bit of it.
Yeah, for us, and as having done the animations for the Kiwis, for us it was just finding a balance between getting that bird-like performance, getting some motions that would read as bird-like, but not having it be so quick as to look clippy or that the player's eye couldn't follow it. So it's a little bit of back and forth. If you're trying stuff out in Maya, sometimes it looks a little different in Unity. And also, you know, the nice thing about our characters is they have, you know, this little ball of fur, and then the beak sticks way out. So when if the head moves just a little bit, that translates down the beak. You can really see that stand out in the level. So, but yeah, there's definitely, I think I would definitely say their movements are. We tried to get that performance in their idle animations and stuff, but it's definitely slower than it would be in real life, just because it's easier to follow with the eye.
Megan or Kingston? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. You first.
Oh, oops. Yeah. So, for our game, because it's a 2D pixel art game, so we can afford to be totally like unrealistic. It's totally cartoony. There's no real bird movements in it. Yeah. So, that's good. And I get a lot of inspiration from Kiki Flipnote. I mean, I'm a big fan. Yeah, so I'm the animator, so I'll just watch myself at the mirror, and then I'll just move and take note of how I want my character to move as well. Yeah.
Do you have a lot of nice round, like bouncy birds in yours, like Kiki Flipnote does? Is that kind of the thought?
Yeah. So I purposely made most of my characters round. So every bird is designed with 2 circles. Yeah, so every birds are basically just 2 circles, like one bigger circle for the body and one smaller one for the head, and that's a bird. Yeah, and with a triangle for a beak. Yeah, that's it.
I also based heavily off of Kiki Flipnote at first. There's like a very early version of the game where I thought I wasn't gonna be able to do realistic birds at all, and I thought it was gonna be more lo-fi 3D would be the right term, but something along those lines. And it was going to be heavily inspired by Kiki Flipnote's Jiggly Birds. I ended up going in the other direction towards more realistic birds, but I still ended up finding that like there's an idle animation that our birds do. That idle animation comes from an idle animation that was on our very first test mesh, which was this brown sparrow thing. It's like just this kind of not good bird. Like here, I'm going to turn on screen share for a sec and show you exactly what I mean, because I can, because we're actually doing a virtual thingy. And that's going to be that. So yeah, it's this. So to be clear, the animation playing right now is the bird dancing the chicken because Mixamo is a terrible thing and it's entirely too addictive. But yeah, what the bird had this animation, and that's the kind of level we're at as far as visuals. That was basically meant to be a stop and peck and idle, but I found that if I sped it up to like 4x speed, it felt more like a bird because it's going faster and twitchier, and it looked like the bird was dancing. And that kind of came through into the current game totally by accident because the animator was like, oh, well, you pointed at this as the reference, so yeah, I did that too. And that's why our birds do this kind of high-speed jiggle dance thing, which ends up making them read more bird, presumably because it moves faster and has more twitchiness to it. And it also works well with the music. It's this weird whole thing that I can't explain.
What about challenges with rendering birds? Small birds especially seem to have quicker movements. Does that like pose any challenge with normal animation? Like what about rendering feathers? Is there anything animation-wise that's interesting about birds?
Oh my God, yeah, I can actually, since I'm actually set up to this. So yeah, we, oh my God, we had so many issues with feathers. Like here, check this out. This was an early test where we were trying to see if we could do feather tech, and we used bacon as a reference, and it was horrifying.
Oh my.
Oh yeah, but what the test eventually showed us was we tried a bunch of the fur and feather shaders that maybe would work with this, and they just don't. You can't, or at least we found that we couldn't do a feathers in like the physical way. I know that like the Falcon game. Anyone remember?
Falcon Age.
Thank you, Falcon Age. Falcon Age actually has a rig where they have a bunch of cards that are not necessarily hand animated, but physically animated in the Animator tool for all of the cards that are the feathers. We didn't go that far. We just went for let's get a feathery, textury kind of look and keep them smooth. Because yeah, we found that that kind of thing was way beyond what we could manage.
Yeah, we kind of lucked out from a technical perspective. I mean, the Kiwi has a very fluffy, downy, almost hair-like feathers. They're just so physically different from so many birds. They're evolved to this almost mammal-like state. And yeah, part of that is that they look almost more like they have fur. So our technical artist, Grant, did a lot of experimentation with different shaders and things to get that look. In the initial prototype, they were just like a sleek mesh. It was just like, you know, something in ZBrush and then spat out a ZBrush and rigged really quickly. But we knew we wanted to have feather fur for them. So we ended up using a fur shader that's repurposed for our needs.
I can speak a little bit. We in the original Fruits of a Feather prototype, I actually used a cloth simulation to animate our cards on the bird's wings and on its tail. We didn't have much plumage on the body and still kind of don't. Generally, all the feathers are just on the wing and on the tail. It's a very weird stylization choice because we're somewhere between like a realism and a hyper realism, I guess. We ended up dropping that for performance reasons because a lot of the solutions that we run into are just like huge performance sinks. And I pointed to how bad the birds look when they land. I'm just landing in our game now because I have it open. I'll just screen share the game. But you can see the amazing landing animation that my seagull has here. So birds also do really interesting things with their wings and with their feathers when they perch. So that was a really weird challenge to run into. So like my shader solution, which we flew with for the actual flapping and sort of wind movement, that works fine when they're gliding, but as soon as they land, you just get all these problems that we didn't have time to solve.
Kingston, did you have anything about animating birds that was interesting? Or rendering birds? I guess it's a different art style.
Oh, so I think I guess I can just talk about how the birds move. So one thing I like about birds is that you know like their head always tends to stay at the same height, like regardless of how the body moves. Yeah, so I find that really interesting to animate birds that way. So the body's moving, but the head stays like stationary. Yeah, so yeah, I just keep making them bounce, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. And when animating our birds, having an IK controller for the head so that we can basically put the head in world space. Obviously, we're 3D versus 2D, like Hong Soon was talking about, but being able to stick the kiwi or the cassowary's head in one position and then just move the body, you can get a lot of that realistic fixation that they get, which is not something you would really ever have to do with a human character rig. So.
Do any of you have birds? And if so, can we see pictures of them? Oh no, the camera. What is that?
It's my skate chicken.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't actually own birds or anything, but I do have a skate chicken.
Anyone else own a bird? No bird?
I also have plush birds.
Plush bird?
Oh my God, they're
You
adorable.
too!
There they are, yeah. That's Jeff and Deborah.
No birds. Did any of you do did you like do studies of birds? Did you go watch? I mean, Megan, you said you have the birds outside that you watched it. Do any of you like go study real birds? Do you have friends with birds? Or like, how did you watch birds to figure out what they were supposed to look like?
For us, it was a lot of finding video reference for whether for doing the character designs or the animations. Fortunately, there's a lot of conservation groups out there that are capturing a lot of footage of kiwi, and so there's some good stuff. We also looked at footage of other bird species that aren't in our game, just because sometimes you need a good orthographic view of a flightless bird running. Like for working on the run cycle, I ended up using a lot of footage of emu chicks for our birds. Yeah. Unfortunately, we can't go and observe any kiwis firsthand, although we would love to. But yeah, the internet was our friend for that.
Any of the rest of you do any bird watching or any bird studies?
I personally didn't for the art side, but I know our sound designer actually went out into the bush to get samples for the audio, both for the individual tweets, because if you change skin or bird in the game, you get unique tweets and sounds, because the tweet is the only form of communication other players have with you. So I think some of those are actually real samples, and then a lot of the ambience is also recorded in the Australian bush.
Nice.
Anyone else?
Yeah, so I think like every modern kid, I watch a lot of YouTube videos, and David Attenborough's documentaries, I watch a lot of them, especially since I started working on Songbird Symphony, I watched even more. And right beside my girlfriend's house, there's a park. So when I visit her during the weekends, then I'll get to see some real bird action like outside her house. I mean, it's just cool, interesting birds flying around. But otherwise, in the more like populated areas in Singapore, it's mostly just crows and miners. So not many interesting birds. Yeah.
Those are good birds, though.
I guess
go
one
ahead.
thing I should say is my partner and I like to go visit shout out to the Audubon Birds of Prey Center in Maitland, Florida, who house and rehabilitate a lot of birds of prey, which we have some interesting ones here in Central Florida. And you can go and get really close up to these birds that are being rehabilitated. It's a favorite thing to go do. So I've done it specifically for research for the game, but I think having that sort of looking at birds in real life, and having that visual kind of library that you can go back to is definitely helpful.
Megan, did you do any dedicated bird watching outside of what you already do in your own yard?
I mean, mostly it was like Kang YouTube. Mostly, for me, it was very specifically bird watching birds on tiny skateboards, which isn't in my backyard as much as I would like it to be. So YouTube, a lot of YouTube, and finding the actual birds that do this. There's I can't remember their TikTok name. There's a relatively recent TikToker who's been teaching his bird to skateboard, and the bird's getting really good. He's also got the bird trained to ride on his shoulder while he's skateboarding, like while the person is skateboarding, and that's very cute. Yeah. If anyone wants to see this, that's probably already on TikTok. Just go there, search. It's great.
Do any of you have a favorite bird, either in real life as like a species or a favorite video game bird?
I do. I'll just go back to the Maitland, Florida Audubon Birds of Prey Center, which has crested caracaras, which are a type of falcon that is mostly lives in Central and South America. But we have a very small population of them here in Central Florida. I'm in Orlando, so they don't live in Orlando proper. But we have this really unique biome in Central Florida that is prairies. A lot of people don't think of prairies when they think of Florida. But these falcons spend a lot of their time on the ground. They run around and scavenge and catch snakes, and even sometimes have big little burrows and stuff. They're a really cool looking bird, and I think they're my favorite bird. They have a few rehabilitating at the Maitland Center. There they are. Yeah.
These guys are adorable.
They're really cool. It's like a long-legged falcon.
I think my favorite's probably going to be ravens, crows, or why am I drawing a blank? Corvids, Corvidae family birds. They're very intelligent. They mourn their dead. They hold grudges. They teach their children to hold grudges. They're really cool birds. And we get a bunch of them in the Northwest. Like we get ravens around here where I live, since I'm out in the country. Closer to town, you get crows, tons and tons and tons of crows. And a lot of times I'll go out on lunch breaks and go sit by the water and feed them French fries and stuff. And they seem to enjoy it.
Is that holding grudges thing the same thing that I've kind of seen around, where like somebody will do something mean to a bird and then the flock will just like bother that person forever, basically, until they move?
Yeah, so you can, what they found in studies is that someone can, for instance, wear a mask of some famous politician, one of the big recognizable rubber ones, and they haze birds. And the crows will fuck with that person, anyone wearing that mask, for years. That way outside of the lifespan of any one bird. They teach their children to who to haze, who to like, etc. In the same way, recognizable people that are nice to the birds can get essentially guardian spirit birds that will just follow them around and be friendly and happy to them. This is a problem in that what the birds are referencing is not necessarily like the things humans think of when we look at recognizability. They're looking more at clothing style, hats, because hats are visible from the top, which means that if like an asshole in a trilby starts fucking with birds, crows in an area could start fucking with everyone who wears a trilby who comes through or something. So it comes across in kind of strange ways, but they're wicked intelligent, and they work as a clan.
Any other favorite beloved birds?
I think the birds of paradise species of birds. I like them because of their wacky dance moves and yeah, all for the sake of getting a partner. Yeah, so I think that's really cute. Yeah.
I've always been a big fan of classic Australian cockatoos. I've grown up on the east coast and the southeast coast, or live in the southeast coast now, and they're common, but they're huge, and they're really, really friendly with humans because they're maybe it's because they're quite so large. But if you leave bird feed out and they start eating it, and you go up to them, they're not going to go away. So a lot of the big white ones. And there's many places where they have feeding areas in public, like national parks, where it's not like these birds are in cages and they bring them up to do feedings and stuff. They just have someone who sells the seed, and all the cockatoos in the area know to come here every day when there are people. So you can be around like 50 of them while you're just sitting there holding some seed. And they're just very large and obnoxious animals that are very beautiful.
It's wild to me that you just have those around. I mean, we're kind of in the same boat. I'm in a city. We've got, pigeons and crows. That's what we got. So that's really cool. Go ahead.
I just really quick wanted to respond to what Megan said about corvids in the Northwest. The biggest, fattest crow I've ever seen was at Hurricane Ridge in Olympic National Park. And every crow I've seen then has paled in comparison. Not literally, because crows tend to be very dark, but yeah. Another crow has quite lived up to that.
Hurricane Ridge is also known for being an area where the birds have all been trained through years and years to be hand-fed, basically. So you go up there with some nuts, you put it at your hand, and a bird appears. It's really freaking awesome.
How did each of you decide which species of bird to include in your games?
We actually crowdsourced it, essentially. Like the birds that I see most often, so chickadees, black-eyed juncos or dark-eyed juncos, house sparrows, the standard backyard birds, because I see them a lot, or I would like those in. But I did a lot of, since I have a Patreon, just do polls for people that really want their birds in the game, or people that did the Kickstarter backing. There was a tier where they could suggest birds to be in the game, just that kind of thing. Since everyone, at least in what we found, is that everyone had their own idea of what bird had to be in the game. Like that was going to be the iconic skateboarding bird. And there were a lot of choices. So we just kind of went, okay, let's just do as many of them as we can. So yeah, that was our approach.
Yeah, so for us for Songbird Symphony, so it really depends on the plot, right? The story at that part of the game. So for example, we have a cassowary in the game, and at that part of the game, we wanted to teach players how to about handling their emotions, feelings of loneliness. So the cassowary is this very aggressive bird. So we tried to subvert players' expectations by making that cassowary in our game to be a very shy bird, and other birds are just scared of it because of its size and it's and for it because it looks scary. So then the job of our bird protagonist or the player will be to try and console the bird through his singing, and to try and resolve his problems, let him know that he's not alone and that it's okay for him to voice out his problems. So that's just an example. So how we choose our birds in our game depends on the story for that part of the game. Yeah.
I want to talk about, I just wanted to mention that the part of the game that Kang Soon is talking about, the reason the cassowary is so sad and shy is because the kookaburras are laughing at him. Or laughing at her. But the kookaburras are a bird that just laughs naturally.
Yeah.
It's really cute. Sorry. Just
a misunderstanding.
Sounds really lovely.
For Feather, we actually launched the game initially with only one bird. So it was a kestrel to start with, though poorly modeled on my part. My actual artists took over the character art when we did updates. People obviously demanded their skins, demanded their particular birds that they wanted. We were restricted a little bit by the rig and wanting to share animations between everything and fitting, stuff with really long necks or stuff that had just like really fat bodies and tiny wings wouldn't really fit. So we sort of went with that sort of like birds of prey adjacent category. That being said, we did try to squeeze in stuff that felt very personal. Like we squeezed a magpie onto the rig because we have to, because otherwise it would be unpatriotic. So yeah, that was the approach basically. But there aren't a lot, and we tried to be very picky with what we put in, or stuff that was just like demanded by the community, like a crow or a raven.
For Kiwi, the initial conceit of the game was based around the fact that it didn't have to be a Kiwi, but the flightless postal bird who worked at a desk shift basically was small enough to run around on a workstation, and we wanted that two-player co-op of, in the initial prototype, working as the left and right hands, basically typing on a giant keyboard by hitting keys with their butts. And the Kiwi was just, the silhouette of it was perfect, and it just felt like the perfect bird. It was like nature had handed us the perfect character design for this, so we lucked out in that sense.
I apologize for my non-bird guest. This question makes me sad. Who is the strongest bird, and what is their weapon of choice if forced to fight to the death? I think this is one of my Twitter followers. No one wants to even consider this.
Unfortunately, it's a minor bird. This is coming from a place of living where there are minor birds everywhere, and they're not meant to be here. Australia is obviously known for invasive species introduced by other countries. In the bird world, the minor bird is strong.
What is the minor bird's weapon of choice?
So I grew up in a house that had palm trees like next to it. So it's a palm tree because they nested there, and my parents' bedroom was right next to them, and they couldn't sleep often as a result of that.
I think I gotta go with seagulls, because seagulls are just, I love them. They're great birds. They eat many French fries and so on and so forth, but they're also assholes, and they swoop people. And sometimes they're swooping because they want to steal your sandwich, which is hilarious, but also sometimes they're just swooping to gore you or to run you off. And yeah, I think their weapon of choice is just the seagull. The seagull it's like a master of kung fu. It is the weapon.
Yeah, I think for me, it will be this bird called the koel. So there are lots of koels in the place where I'm living in, and it makes lots of noise in the morning. I think that is its biggest weapon. Like everybody will be woken up by this bird, and it goes like woo, something like that. Like it's a really it's a very recognizable call sign, I guess. Yeah, it's the koel is annoying.
I just Googled koel, and I don't think that I can necessarily share the Google image results just because it's kind of a mess, but I like how many of these are edited images of what I presume to be koels with a bunch of text overlaid talking about how ridiculously obnoxious they are. All right. Do video game birds have a T-pose? Does anyone know? And if so, what does it look like?
I can show you what our birds look like in their default pose, although I'm assuming the question asker was imagining what the T-pose would look like with the wings, so
yeah,
you won't be able to see that, but I can show you what. This is our Kiwi's T-pose. It's not very exciting. It's a kiwi in just a completely neutral pose. This is what they look like without their first showing. And the nice thing is they don't have wings. We haven't even modeled wings for them. Their wings are so tiny and vestigial that they might as well be non-existent. So this is what our kiwi looks like.
Call that like a lowercase r pose? I don't know.
It's K pose.
K pose.
So our birds actually do have a T-pose, and they look something like this. This is we went through a ton of revisions of birds. This was we called it the upper bird because it has a swoopy up tail, and we put them in many hats and knee pads and so on and so forth. The wings, because they're so stubby and weird, whenever we actually put it into more of a normal bird pose, we don't use the bones to bend it into shape. We actually use blend shapes because bird wings are weird. And the reason a bird's wings look so elegant and svelte when they're folded is because the feathers overlap and kind of meld, and we can't do that. So our approach was to blend shape instead, which is essentially shoving the vertices to where we want them to go. And that worked pretty well. Oh, and the headphone bird ended up being the iconic bird and became the title image. And I have no idea why. So that's our T-pose.
Birds just look good with headsets.
They do. Are there any games that prominently feature birds in it that any of you don't like for any reason? No strong dislikes of bird games?
I didn't play it, so it's kind of a hard reference. But Battlefield 1 was like called out for having this sick emotional moment where you play as a bird and you like fly over the battlefield.
Huh.
And at the time I was working on Feather and I was like, oh, this is shitty. Like I kind of embarked on this game because I really was, at the time I was making a shooter at the studio. We were also making a shooter. So I wanted to I was making Feather because I was like, I don't want combat. I don't want violence. I don't want guns. I just want like a nice thing for people to enjoy. And then it's like this AAA game comes out and does probably renders their bird way better than we do. But just I guess misses the point. But there's no games that feature birds directly.
Okay, nicer note. What's the best video game bird that's not represented on the panel?
I'm just going to say Goose Game, and then we can talk about all the other ones because, yeah. Anyways, that's not my choice, but Goose Game, clearly.
Any other favorite bird games?
I like A Short Hike. So I think that game came out about the same time as Songbird, and so after having released a game, and I decided not to touch any games for a while or do any games related things. It was making games is a very tiring process, and so I was looking for cute casual games to play, and I found A Short Hike released just a few days after Songbird was released, and it's a cute little game that I managed to finish in just 3 to 4 hours, and I love it a lot. Yeah, I think to me that is one of the best bird games I've ever played.
It's another Kiwi game, but if anyone's played Ivy the Kiwi, it's a really cute DS and Wii game where you it's kind of like Lemming style, drawing paths for this bird because it's flightless, so you have to let it pass it as a platformer. It's very, very cute little Kiwi asset in it.
I just thought of this is going to sound weird, but for anyone that's played World of Warcraft, there's a race in World of Warcraft it's their version of the Aarakocra from D&D, that they have the Arakoa, this humanoid bird race, which in WoW was very heavily inspired by the Skeksis from Dark Crystal, and they have designed this really cool culture around them, and the flightless versions and the flying versions, and I always thought that was really cool. And they really nailed the twitchy head animations on those characters.
Their architecture is fantastic.
It's
Was
so
that
cool,
what was that
right?
Warlords of Draenor that they were really prominent in? Oh man, I wanted them as a playable race so bad.
Oh, me too.
They sold a really good mount in Burning Crusade. I remember that.
Yes, I know the one you're talking about.
Are there any games with non-player character birds that you would retell from the bird's perspective? These are all audience submitted questions. These are great.
I want to play Falcon Age as the bird.
That's a good one. I want to play any of the Assassin's Creeds that had the post adding the bird as like a mechanic thing. Just the entire game as the bird would be fun.
I think for me it would be the chickens in the Zelda games. So if you hit a chicken enough time, then there'll be an army of chickens will appear and kill the player. So I really wanted to, maybe a game in their perspective, like where did all their chicken friends come from, where do they stay, what they are thinking when the players are hitting them. Yeah.
I'm not in the. I'm moderating. I don't have a comment here, but I got to shout out the Rito from Breath of the Wild. Rivali rules. I would play a game as Rivali or Cass. Cass is the bard. I would love a game as Cass.
Cass, we need an entire Cass game. Cass
Oh my
is
gosh.
awesome.
Traveling musician, fantastic. Do any of your games have any Easter eggs or any bird puns or any cool little like discoverable bird related things that someone might find and stumble upon?
We have, I don't want to spoil how it's obtained, but we have a way where one of the kiwis can basically electrocute themselves and obtain a crispy smoking kiwi feather that is part of the collectible system in our game that unlocks a cool sort of electric themed cosmetic where the kiwi's hair is all standing on end.
In Feather, people know about the fishing micro game, I'll call it, because it's there and you can fish. People don't, I'm not going to reveal how to do it if anyone's a Feather fan, but and very few people know you can poop in the game, but it's there.
Any other Easter eggs or little hidden bird related things or puns? Anyone have a good bird pun?
I'm sure there are a lot of bird puns that will end up because, I mean, the game is being written by Zalave and Master. The poop thing reminded me. We're thinking of adding pooping to Skatebird too. Bird pooping is just like a thing that birds do. It's one of the reasons why I don't really want to have birds inside. Bird owners just get used to putting towels on their desk and so on and so forth because birds, they don't have anuses, so they just kind of enter their little pooping pose and then they poop wherever they are, and that's just how they do. So working that into the game as a weird little Easter egg would entertain me. I don't know if they're going to do it or not. You're like post-release DLC for pooping DLC.
That's one thing you got to say for birds. You can see scat from a lot of different animals and be like, I don't know what that's from. But when it's a bird's, you know it.
Oh, I've got a bird fact from this that I did learn because of the game. Whenever birds are nesting, the baby birds obviously defecate because everything living does. But they try not to sully the nest because they have to live in that nest for the next however long until they are old enough to fly. Two major ways of fixing this. One, a lot of baby birds learn to poop over the edge of the nest. So like they'll aim their little butts over it and you see these little geysers come out of the nest and it's horrifying. And that's why the edges of nests often look really disgusting, and that's just part of being birds. But also robins especially, actually their baby birds poop essentially little envelopes, like they're sausages essentially. And the robins pick them up and drop them nearby to throw off predators. So they like output it and export it. And they, generally speaking, they try to do this in running water to further throw off predators, but sometimes they think your sidewalk is running water because it kind of looks that way from this air. So that's why you will sometimes around nesting season for robins get these really, really weird slug poop things that you don't know
That's what those are.
That's what that is.
That was an incredible bird fact. And we are running up on an hour, and I think we're going to have to end on that incredible bird fact. Megan Fox, if people wanted to find you and your bird-related work, where would they look for you?
You would find me on Twitter as Glassbottom Meg. You can also find the bird, the eponymous skatebird, at skateburb on Twitter. You can also go to skate.burb.rocks on the internet, or you can just search us on Twitter or on Steam or whatever. We're everywhere. It's easy to find.
Nicholas, how about you?
I'm Nicholas MC1 on Twitter. Samurai Punk, it's just Samurai Punk on Twitter. And our website is samuraipunk.com.
Kingston, where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter. So my handler is cute green thing. And you can find us, our website is joysteak.com, Joysteak, like happy stick. And you can find our game on Steam, Switch, and PS4. Yeah.
And Joel, how about you?
Find us on Twitter at KiwiGame. Our website is kiwigame.com, and you can also find the Kiwi listing on Steam, where you can wishlist it.
Awesome. And I don't make games or do anything bird related, but you can find me on Twitter at Duck Valentine, which I guess ducks are birds, so it counts. This was Bird is the Word, Winged Heroes and Indie Games. Have a great rest of your PAX Online, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And we're